Livestock Data for Decisions, LD4D, was established in 2017 to bring people together from a range of organizations, industry, and academia to work on closing livestock data gaps and other solutions to livestock data challenges. Today, we're here because we want to explore how this community, this livestock data community, can respond to the livestock data challenges related to the COVID-19 pandemic. LD4D facilitates discussions and collective actions among our members. We don't have specific resources to fund COVID-19 actions, but we want to explore ideas that could be jointly taken forward by members of this community. So it's really a brainstorming space to start with. So we're going to get started with our speakers. We have 3 invited speakers who will share different livestock sector perspectives. They will have 5 minutes each to introduce their topic and update us on how their work relates to livestock data and COVID-19 and suggest possible community responses. So I'm going to invite Dr. Simplice Nouala, who's calling from Kenya. He is head of division of agriculture and food security at the African Union Commission, and his background is in tropical animal health and production. So Simplice, will unmute you and please go ahead.
Okay, so thank you very much, and thank you for having me as part of this panel discussion on the livestock data and the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, I will speak from the African Union perspectives, and my remarks will really be focusing on that. And as you know, as per today, we have the information from the African CDC that indicate that 54 out of 55 African Union member states have reported cases of COVID-19. And we have about 110,000 cases on the continent with about more than 3,000 deaths. And one major issue of concern within the African Union is the impact of COVID-19 on the African fragile food system and the resultant effect on the household food security and nutrition. You are equally aware that prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, Africa was already food insecure as a result of pre-existing crises in many countries, including drought, climate change, fragility, conflict, violence, disease outbreak. And if we are talking of animals, we are talking here of PPR, African swine fever, invasive species in the Horn of Africa with the locust invasion and so on. So the question today is, how do we make sure that we don't move from the health crisis to a food crisis due to this pandemic? So, mindful of the above, the ministers in charge of agriculture of the African Union met on the 16th of April this year in a virtual meeting co-organized by the FAO and the African Union. And they basically discussed 5 main topics: the social protection, the cropping calendar, the domestic market, the regional market, and then ensuring the issues of safeguarding access to input chain. What is important is that the ministers, at the end of their discussion, they took some recommendations. And they took basically 12 recommendations, and I've just picked 5 of them that could speak to livestock and to what we are discussing today. One of the first recommendations that the ministers take was that we should ensure food safety net and provide agricultural input so that the production chain is not disrupted. And when we are talking here of agricultural input and speaking to livestock, we are talking of veterinary drugs, animal feed, breeding stocks, and so on. So we should ensure that this is provided so that production is not disrupted. The second thing is that the recommendation that the minister speaks to was to maintain the borders open to facilitate the trade of food and agricultural products. The next one was to work on post-harvest losses, to reduce post-harvest losses so to ensure that we have enough food. And lastly, they did mention that we need to have data that is collected and disseminated to government so that the government should know actually what is the impact of the pandemic on food security so as to take informed decisions. So as you can see, it's quite important that knowing that the limited access to data, to quality data, has always been a major constraint to agricultural development on the continent. The ministers, when they met almost a month back now, took a decision that we should make available data to inform decisions or to inform actions to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on the agricultural sector, on food security. So now, if we are talking of livestock and looking at the recommendation, the question that one can ask itself is, what type of data do we need to make available to ministers? The first, and my co-panelists, Ugo here, we know that we have worked on this over the years, but still there is a gap there. We need to have reliable data on the contribution of livestock to food security. This is something that is really missing, and without having data that speaks to livestock and food security at this moment, we may not really make an impact in the actions that will be taken by the ministers. We need to have data that speaks not only to livestock, and I will come to the livestock later, but data that speaks to the livelihood and food security of livestock-dependent communities. How many pastoralists, if we are on the continent, are likely to be affected by the pandemic? And what would be the impact of this on the pastoral production systems? So we need to know this type of information. We need, now coming to livestock data themselves, if we want to ensure that we provide enough input to maintain the production system, we need to have data on the breeding material, on replacement stocks. Basically here, if you are talking of day-old chicks, how many day-old chicks do we need in a country, for example? I was reading a news, I think last week, and some countries who are basically depending on import of this replacement stock for their poultry industry were already on crisis. So now if today the governments want to take a decision to open what people will call a green corridor to access to these day-old chicks, they need to have information on how much, what is the quantity we need. We need to have information on animal feed. There is very little data on animal feed on the continent, being the production, being the animal feed reserve, being the demand. We need to have information on vaccines and veterinary drug, demand and supply. In terms of the transhumance, the pandemic in Africa occurred, the first cases in March, was basically at the middle of the transhumance. So once the borders were closed, there are some pastoralists who are locked in the regions where they went for transhumance. How many are there? If they want to open corridor for this to come back, there is a need to know how many pastoralists are blocked there. In terms of trade, we need to have information on market demand, on price, both at farm gate and on the market in order to avoid soaring of food price. So these are some of the data that we need to have. You can have some of this data if you go around, start searching, but the question is, what is the quality of the data that you are having? And I think this is where this platform is an important one. And this platform can play that role in providing data that will certainly, in terms of the methodology of collecting the data, in terms of the way the data is being processed and made available, this platform, I think, has the responsibility of ensuring that the data that will be used by the member state are of good quality. So I think we are monitoring from the African Union and the FAO. We have established a task force to monitor the implementation of the recommendations of the ministers. But one thing that would be key in monitoring this will be, what data do we have? What is the quality of data that is available for us, to us? And I think this platform and the discussion that we will have today will certainly open the path to this. And I just wish all of us fruitful deliberation. I hope we will have enough time to interact. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Simplice. A lot to think about. That was extremely helpful, and I've already seen some interesting responses in the chat. So if people have ideas that pop in to your heads as you listen, feel free to put them in the chat so we can keep track. Okay, we're going to move on to our next speaker. Joining us from Rome is Ugo Pica-Ciamarra, a livestock economist with the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO. Ugo has been actively involved in LD4D since the community was started in 2017. So over to you, Ugo. I know you want to share a presentation.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. And first of all, thanks to Sebi for giving me the opportunity to give a short presentation about livestock data and COVID-19. And I'm going a bit to complement, I would say, what Simplice has just said, because I'm really trying to highlight in this short presentation what are the challenges that we currently face when we want to measure the impact or design interventions related to livestock and COVID-19. So, okay, so first I've just taken, a few bullet points from a very recent FAO publication, guidelines to mitigate the 19 on livestock production and animal health. And you can see on the left-hand side, that there's plenty of different, impacts. So there's difficulty moving live animals and animal products. There are challenges for farmers to purchase necessarily production inputs. There is disruption of informal businesses. There is reduced consumption demand and even public procurement. So for example, because of unemployment or suspension of school feeding programs, there's also reduced government capacity to prevent and control animal diseases. So what FAO is doing is more or less in line with what, with what Simplice said. So we're basically doing two major things. First of all is really to understand, the impact on food and agriculture. And to this aim, FAO has put up a major global data facility for which the objective is really to assess where there are potential food crises. And then, of course, there are actions that should be taken on the ground to safeguard food security and livelihoods of people. And then there are the two small, I would say, activities. On the one hand, there is a research activity that aims at understanding what is the origin of the virus. And the other is more about the approach. It's important to have a multidisciplinary, multi-stakeholder approach, a One Health approach to deal with COVID-19. Now, what are the issues that we face when we want, take action? What are the issues in terms of data? And I think, first of all, is that COVID-19 affects all livestock system in all countries. It's about large ruminants, it's about small ruminants, pigs, poultry, all continents, right? And usually if you think of past, livestock related crises, they were always, for just one species, and you can think of avian influenza or BSE or the African swine fever, right? And often they were also geographically contained. Now instead, we have a crisis, COVID-19, that is affecting all species throughout all countries. Second point is that, COVID-19 is not only affecting production. And actually producers were the ones largely affected by previous crises, but it is affecting all segments of the livestock value chain. So it's input suppliers, producer, processor, trader, consumers, right? And let me just, now the last point is that in normal times, as Simplice said, we typically complain, that we don't have enough sufficient data to make the case for investing in livestock and then to design investing in policies. And right now, what's also happening, this situation is becoming worse because actually COVID-19 is also affecting the capacity of countries to collect data. And there are a couple of briefs published by the FAO statistics divisions that actually show how actually the statistical operations have been in many countries suspended, or at least countries are trying to reinvent, their data collection tools. And this is not something that one can do overnight. So my point is that perhaps, my question is that can we really assess the impact of COVID-19 on the livestock sector with any accuracy? Impact on what? Are we talking about trade? Are we talking about consumption, and on whom? You talk about producers, consumers, even the government. So it's very difficult. I think that we really need to reduce, our question. And as Simplice has suggested, perhaps it's very important to understand the relationships between livestock and food security. But then I have another question. Why do we want to assess the impact on COVID-19 on the livestock sector? Right now, all countries are taking actions. Do we really want to measure the impact with a significant level of accuracy, or is it sufficient to have a broad understanding of what is the impact to take action? Because how long it takes to collect good data, make an analysis, and then provide robust recommendations with the government. Do we have the time? Can we afford spending time in gathering data to make sophisticated and complex analysis or high quality analysis to provide recommendations to the government? So this is the first question. And in my opinion, perhaps what the livestock data community can do should be a bit more strategic and look beyond, the current COVID-19 crisis, because I don't think that this community can really provide, data to all the countries in all systems, to assist in mitigating, the negative impacts on the livestock sector of COVID-19 on the livestock sector. And I think, that at least 4 areas where the community could play a role. First of all, I think it would be very nice to show that investment in livestock in times of crisis generate high social returns, right? And this is regardless of COVID-19. This could be a way of making a case, as Simplice said, to invest in livestock to support food security and nutrition in this time of crisis. Second point is that there will be, for sure, more COVID-19 in the future. Population growth, urbanization, increased demand of livestock products. There is an ongoing livestock revolution. And perhaps we should ask ourselves, which are the livestock systems that are more resilient to external shocks? A local versus global, or small scale versus large scale? These are important questions, that one should answer to provide guidance, strategic guidance to policymakers to, steer the development of the livestock sector in a sustainable trajectory. And finally, the other element that I think one should look at are really these emerging zoonotic diseases, because we know that they are the potential source of the next pandemic. But in many cases, we are a bit passive, and perhaps we should become more proactive. We should become more proactive. So we should invest, in scenario foresight analysis to improve our capacity to predict a bit the future, right? Because we know that prevention is better than cure. And you see here, I use the word scenario foresight, not projections, because I think there's a lot of uncertainty, in the future. So we need to go beyond projection. And I also think that another important element that we should focus on is really about data to rethink the role of the public and private sector in providing animal health services. Particularly in Africa, we know that in the 80s, animal health services were dismantled because of structural adjustment programs, and since then, nothing has really changed. But now, throughout the world, there is a new conversation, a new debate about what should be the role of the public and the private sector to provide public health services, and zoonotic diseases basically generate, negative public health outcomes. So actually they are a sort of a public good, a public bad. And I think that, gathering data about, the role of the current role of animal health services and how we can rethink about, the connection between public and private sectors in providing animal health services is something really that we should try to do within this community. And that was my last point. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ugo. You can close your screen share. Thank you so much. Okay, we're going to move on to our next presenter, Delia Grace. She's Professor of Food Safety Systems at the Natural Resources Institute. She is also a flagship leader for the CGIAR Research Program on Agriculture for Nutrition and Health, and a researcher at the International Livestock Research Institute, ILRI. And she's calling us today from Kenya. So we'll just unmute you, Delia, and go ahead, please.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I was asked to talk about the role of data in predicting and responding to emerging zoonotic diseases. I'm an epidemiologist, and I'm going to focus on the epidemiological data. And I'd also like to make the distinction between wartime and peacetime. Now, we can think of wartime as when a disease has emerged that has jumped species from animals into people. 75% of new human diseases are zoonotic, or when a disease has turned up in a place where it shouldn't. And in this situation, the key data needed is detection of spillover and emergence. We know that, or some of our estimates are that up to 90% of the costs of disease outbreaks can be reduced by rapid detection and response. And we do have several early warning systems for animal and human disease. The problem is that they're not very well funded, they're not very well joined up, and in many, if not in most cases, there are actually perverse incentives for not reporting disease. That is, people are incentivized into reporting, not reporting, or reporting late. But once the disease is there, once we know a spillover or an emergence event has happened, then we need to know what is its potential for harm. And in fact, most of these new diseases just burn out. They don't have long-lasting or severe consequences, which is one of the challenges, because we're crying wolf a lot of the time, and then when the wolf really does come into the farmyard, people aren't always ready for it. Other diseases continue just to be in the environment and affect people from time to time. Diseases like Lyme disease or some of these emerging food safety diseases. And here we need data on what's going on in the animal host, and how can One Health systems, how can the human health, environment health, and animal health people work together to manage these diseases. But in a small number of diseases, they become mainly spread by human to human transition. And then they have potential to become pandemics. Diseases like HIV/AIDS, or at the moment COVID-19. And this is where a lot of data is needed, and it is really shocking how little data we have on the epidemiology of COVID-19, but it's not really the role of livestock data anymore at this point. It's how the disease is behaving in people. But one information where livestock data is still relevant is what are the costs and the unintended consequences of control on the livestock sector and on the outputs of the livestock sector. And I think my colleagues discussed that a lot. But that will then take me back to peacetime, because as was said, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And a lot of the talk of information to be gathered is information on impact, information on management, but it's not information on how to stop it happening in the first place. And yet we know a lot about what drives zoonosis to emerge. We're doing a study with UNIP at the moment, and the factors have been established and studied. Agricultural intensification, changes in land use, changes in food system, use of wildlife, global trade and travel. And we also know a lot about the drivers of the drivers, why these things are happening. And a lot of them are related to population, demography, modernization, urbanization, and this revolution, this increasing demand for animal source foods. What we don't know very much is how to mitigate the drivers and how to mitigate the drivers of the drivers. So that, in my view, is where there has been least attention, and yet unless we get the data there, we're just going to have more and more of these pandemics at a higher and higher rate. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Delia, and I've seen some interesting reflections as you spoke in the chat, so that's most welcome. Okay, so we're going to, that's the end of the sort of formal introductory presentations. So thank you all to all the speakers for their insights. Now, before we get into the discussion, we want to point you to livestockdata.org, which was launched by the LD4D community this week. And we hope that livestockdata.org will underpin any data and tools the community generates in relation to this discussion, but also more broadly. So I'm going to invite Gareth Salmon from SEBI, who project managed the website, to just briefly introduce the site so it's in the back of your minds as we continue the discussion. Over to you, Gareth.
Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you for the interesting presentations as well from the
Gareth,
three speakers.
You might want to check which screen you're sharing.
Okay. There you go. Is that better?
Perfect.
Yeah, so the livestockdata.org website is now live and publicly accessible. The objective of the website aligns directly with that of the LD4D community of practice, and that is to drive informed livestock decision-making through better use of data and analysis. The website links data from different sources and presents it in easy-to-use tools with the ambition to give decision makers the best available evidence. The development of the website has been through collaboration enabled by the LD4D community of practice, and we see the future success of the website also being influenced by this network of expertise. So this is the home screen, and I would encourage people to have a look, and we welcome comments and feedback. There are some first data products on the website demonstrating the concepts of what we're hoping to do. However, this is not a promotion of a finished product, but instead this is more the dissemination to the community of a resource that will continue to be developed over time. SEBI continues to provide the resource to be able to develop and populate the website, but the guidance and suggestions from the community will determine its overall effectiveness and long-term impact. So it's all about the community of practice supporting this. In the context of COVID-19 and this webinar, the key question is, how can livestockdata.org be developed and deployed to respond to such challenges? The SEBI colleagues listening into the call will be listening to the discussion to see how livestock data can be developed to meet such requirements, but your comments and suggestions are expected and are also welcome. So whether it's today or in the future, if you just let us know any comments and suggestions for the website. Thank you. Thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you, Gareth. Okay, you can stop sharing your screen. All right, so now for the exciting part, we're going to get into the discussion, and I'm going to introduce a tool that we've used in our face-to-face meetings. So it's a bit of an experiment, if it works. So this is a tool called Menti. It's a voting tool, or it's a tool to gather input and participation from people. So basically, we'll have some discussion questions, which I will just show to you now. What actions are you already taking? What actions could we take as a community? And how could we make best use of your community resource, livestockdata.org? So in order to participate, you'll need a browser window open, or a second device, perhaps a smartphone, a tablet, another laptop. And you would go to menti.com and use the code 920111. And I'm going to enter that into the chat now so that you can also copy and paste it. So take a moment to get that set up, and then I'll bring up the first question for us to respond to. Right, and if you have technical problems, just post in the chat and we'll see if we can help you. All right, so hopefully everyone is set up now, and we'll just go to the first discussion question. And the way this works is you can enter more than once. You can enter one or more comments, and your ideas will start appearing on the screen. So what we want to do with this question is really take stock of what's going on, what's happening, what's out there. And if you can add your name and organization to your comment, that would be really helpful. And I see there's a hand up from Brian Perry. Did you want to ask a question? Oops, there he is.
So Vanessa, I'm going to join in here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can I make?
Sorry, go ahead, Brian. Oh, you've muted yourself.
Okay. Can I make a comment?
Sure.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to just say there were two things that I didn't see here within those excellent presentations, and those are the following. One is one of the key issues relating to this zoonotic disease that has been apparent in the gap is what I call a network analysis relating to the human-animal bond, whether it is with cattle, sheep, goats, horses, small animals, in terms of the dynamics of the disease, the struggle in looking at p-values in different communities, and not understanding in the terms of livestock of the role, the interaction, the interface. I know a lot of it's markets, but the need for network data relating to animal-human bond, number one. The second one, and this is relating to the role of animal health laboratories in supporting, coming in and providing human disease diagnostic and support capacity. I know at least two or several examples of where veterinary laboratories have stepped in to take in a big role, and I wonder whether the data on where those are, what role they play would be useful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No, that's really good. I think we'll have a little bit of time after this slide to get into some proposed actions or filling gaps and so forth. So I do appreciate that. And thank you for everyone who's been inputting their actions into the Menti. There's some very interesting things happening. I've asked SEBI Deputy Director Karen Smith to join me in moderating this part, so you'll hear from her as well.
Hello everyone.
There she is. Okay.
I'm also trying to read the screen and trying to pick out different points that have come up. I see a couple of people are involved in collecting data on farmers and governments at the minute. So what we plan to do is pull this information together and share it in a post-meeting report. So your comments won't go unnoticed if we don't find them.
Yeah, and we have opportunities afterwards. We might do a post-meeting survey to gather anything that's slipped through the cracks. Okay. Yep. We'll give you all another minute to enter your actions already underway before we move on to the question around what can we collectively do. I think one of the big sort of the way that we work with LD4D is that the community can do more together than individual institutions can on their own. So this idea of collective action, and what can we do?
So it's quite difficult to read them because they're moving at such a rate. So it's really good that so many people are input into this. I think we're probably slowing down. I see some of the same comments coming around at speed.
I think we'll move on. You'll have a chance if you have something that you want to add later, we'll make sure to find a way to get it from you. So we're going to move on to the next slide. So now think a little bit about collective action. Where are some of the bigger data gaps that you heard from the presenters? Where could we combine forces, expertise, resources, and so forth to try to address some of these challenges that were brought up? So take your time, please, and go ahead and
maybe also reflect on some of the chat discussions. We've had some quite nice comments, and that might throw up some ideas about how we as a community can work together. It could be as simple as maybe having a web page on livestockdata.org to promote the work of the community and to help you link closer together, link up with each other. Or as at the other end of the spectrum, we could propose to pull together some sort of a proposal for research ideas. So the first comment has come in, data tools, decision support tools, I guess. This is possibly a more difficult thing to consider. I guess some people are working together already. That might also be interesting to know about if you've got collaborations between yourself and another organization. There's a suggestion that we link with other related initiatives, agree on matrix and measures. That's a good suggestion. And that's something that's certainly come up within our time within livestock data, LD4D. The need for metrics and measures. Better coordination of surveys, that's a good suggestion. And livestockdata.org can certainly help with that. Sharing data more openly. I see a point there about systematic papers, systematically reviewed papers. We've got a visualization on that in the visualization section, which pulls together a lot of data and it's all open and accessible. Vanessa, do you see new comments coming up, or?
Well, I've just paused the scroll because people felt like it was moving a bit too fast.
People are getting seasick.
I know. So I think what we could do, we've had 25 ideas put on the screen. I'll see if I can change the way, if I'll just stop sharing my screen for a moment, I'll change the way they scroll, but perhaps Karen, now we can call on a few people to elaborate on their ideas. So I don't know if you want
Sure,
to.
that sounds like a great idea.
People can raise their hands and Alep can help unmute after Karen picks who can speak first.
Well, if anyone has any points that they would like to raise just now, I can't see the screen, please put your hand up. Anything that stood out to you as a particularly good idea or initiative that collectively we could work on that might offer some value? So Vanessa, we can't see the Menti screen, that's it.
I've just turned off the auto scrolling, so I'm manually scrolling.
Okay, so somebody suggests that we need to prioritize livestock data needs. Does anyone have a comment on that?
You can raise your hand. If you want a reminder how to raise your hand, I can just quickly share the instructions for that. Just a moment. So this is how you raise your hand in Zoom. You click the icon labeled participants at the bottom center of your screen. Oops. And then click on the right side the button that says raise hand, and we'll note the order in which the hands go up and call on people.
Okay, I'm trying to, I don't know if I can view the raised hands or not. It might be useful to put the Menti up again.
Yeah. Okay, I don't see any raised hands at the moment. So, oh, Isabel from ILRI, I'll unmute you. Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. So I think in terms of, it looks like many people like ILRI are currently trying to get a better understanding of the impact, both the short and the long-term changes due to COVID, and it may be useful to see how we can kind of collaborate on that. Somebody mentioned metrics or indicators. Other people talk about coordination. I think it would be worth discussing that. Over.
Thank you, Isabel. That's useful comments, and perhaps we can combine the information together and get some reactions from others in the communities to that effect.
I have a hand up from yes. Andy Peters, Sebi. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Vanessa. I just wanted to congratulate and thank the three speakers, and particularly for being very concise and sticking to time. But I wanted to ask Delia in particular a couple of questions, if I could, please. Delia, thanks for your presentation. For me, you kind of got onto the interesting bit right at the end, and you started to talk about mitigation and drivers of drivers, I think. And I wonder if you could just expand on that a little bit as to how, what are the ways in which we could kind of understand that a bit better, and in terms of being a bit more proactive in terms of prevention and mitigation. And the other question was, I think earlier on you'd mentioned something about we need to know what's going on in the animal house. At least I think that's what you said. And could you kind of elaborate on that a little bit, please, about how we might understand what's going on in the animal house a bit better? Thank you.
Yes, I think one of the problems with pandemics is once they get into people, they become medicalized. And then it becomes treated as a kind of as a crisis. So everybody must rush out and do things. And then the crisis is over, and usually we manage it, and then everybody kind of goes quiet again. And yet, unless we look at the One Health, unless we take an eco-health, One Health lens, unless we understand how the way our food systems are driving the emergence of these new diseases, they're just going to come again and again at ever increasing rapidity. And also, as I said, there is this complex interplay between many of these pathogens move around fairly freely between different animals, including human animals and livestock and wildlife. And again, once the focus has become on the people, it's very hard to take it back onto the livestock and the environment, which is where it's actually coming from. So that would be my quick expansion to say that we're just going to be here again unless we go back to the sources of how we got here. Over.
Thank you so much, Delia. That's great. Karen, did you want to add anything, or do we want to hear from a few more people who've suggested actions?
Sure. I think there was a point earlier about merging data sets, and it related to some of the work that Ugo was doing, and I think Simplice mentioned, but I can't see that in the Menti screen at the minute.
I see a hand up from Mizek Chagunda. I'm going to unmute you, Mizek.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Mizek Chagunda here from the University of Hohenheim in Germany. Again, to add to Anders' voice, thank you to all the presenters. And thank you for Sebi really putting up this discussion this afternoon. My very quick comment is on what both Ugo and Simplice alluded to, and that's the importance of investing in livestock based on this crisis. I completely agree. It's a bad thing that we have a crisis, but it can be taken as an opportunity for new impotence in livestock data. Now, my question is, did you mean to say just investment in livestock? Or actually, we could take this as an opportunity to demonstrate the importance of livestock data and then invest in the livestock data to cover those gaps that Simplice indicated very well, that we actually don't have data quantity as well as data quality. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mizek. That's really helpful. So we've collected about 31 ideas for action. So there's a lot to look through there. We've heard some interesting follow-ups on that. I think what we want to try to do is connect this with sort of the practical side, which is the next question. How can we make best use of this resource, livestockdata.org? So once again, it's a bit of a brainstorm. If you can think of suggestions in the context of this discussion, but obviously if you have broader suggestions as well, that's most welcome.
I'm impressed by these three comments. They were very on the ball. They were ahead of you, Vanessa.
Yeah, I don't know how they got ahead.
I don't know.
So we'll give you a few moments to enter your thoughts.
Maybe we could invite whoever made the comment connecting to remote sensing across feed, animal, water, to maybe elaborate a little bit more on that. What can be done there, and what is your thinking around that?
That was D. Baker from Australia. Do you want to put your hand up? We can find you on the participants list. Derek Baker.
So this question is maybe difficult to answer. How can we make best use of the resource? We've got Derek now, so Vanessa, perhaps you could let him speak.
Yeah, hi everyone. Derek Baker speaking, calling from Australia, and many thanks for allowing me to be on board here. It's a very nice session, and nice to see so many friends still focused on these kinds of problems. Yeah, so I'm working at a university in Australia where we're doing quite a lot of work on remote sensing. A lot of it is looking at crop yields and forecasting and things like that. And we're actually covering quite a lot of ground of quite valuable livestock related data, particularly where there are certain resources that are quite relevant to crises of the kind that we are experiencing here. And listening to Simplice's well-chosen words earlier, I was thinking that that really there's some good uses there for some of that remote sensing data.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, could I just also say, I'm sorry I can't turn my camera on. I have a very weak internet connection at home, so it dies when I turn the camera on.
No, thank you very much, Derek. I'm glad that you could join us on the call today. Could we also, I saw in the Menti a comment from John Claxton. I don't know if you want to elaborate a bit, John, there. Somebody also put something up about client surveys. I guess that would be surveys to the community, just checking that we're moving in the right direction. Any elaboration there?
Sorry, I've been unmuted now. So the comment was really that I think it's important to try and keep the thing up to date, because one of the problems with all these websites is they tend to sort of drift off after being set up and being very sort of well used to start with. There's a risk that they sort of become a little bit less used and maybe less up to date. And if they become less up to date, people use them less. So it sort of becomes a never-ending circle. So I think it just needs to be careful that it's maintained. And then the other part was simply to suggest that maybe it could also be a forum for setting up collaborations, setting up new sort of groups, new collaborations to do research and other things.
That's a nice idea, John, maybe to have a work area where people can post and look for new collaborations. Maybe I see Alan's hand going up, but then maybe with regards to your point on keeping the website current, Gareth could respond to that. So can we unmute Alan, please?
Did I put my hand up? I didn't mean to put my hand up.
Sorry, Alan.
I just typed a thing into the chat box, but I mean, Derek's talking about remote sensing, and Simplice was talking about the idea of borders closing, disrupting livestock movements, and there might be potential to use some of those fancy new satellites to kind of have a look at how livestock movements are being disrupted as a result of the pandemic.
Okay, Alan, thanks for your comment, and it's easy to press the wrong button on this, I know. Gareth, would you like to come back on John's comments about keeping the website up to date?
Yeah, hello. So SEBI will continue to be a resource to kind of to curate the website. But yes, I agree, trying to keep it up to date and relevant is the ongoing challenge. So we'll be hopefully linking, well, we will be linking to partner websites. So when data gets updated on partner websites, the central point in livestock data will have the most up-to-date results on what is available. And then we're also working closely with informatics within the University of Edinburgh to kind of automate a lot of this data collection so that it can be much more up to date. It's not so much a human process. It's using machine learning and Internet of Things and those kind of concepts to keep data up to date as much as we can. But if there are other ideas of how that is improved, we'd welcome those.
Thank you, Gareth. There's been quite a lot of effort put into developing automated processes for the website, so hopefully that will help us a lot in keeping it up to date. Somebody has said about allowing people to submit their own data on COVID and livestock. I think that would be great. Technically, I guess you contact the host ourselves at SEBI, and we can ensure that that happens. So we would actively encourage you to look at the website and identify areas that are missing or you feel could benefit from your own data or insights, and we'll try and update the website. It's very much a community resource. We want you to use it. We want it to be useful for you. Vanessa, have you seen any comments that you would like to?
So we've been listening and taking careful notes of all the things that have come in, and we actually have a poll, and some people are very fast. So if you look on your screen, we've put a poll which you can now vote in terms of what action should we prioritize as a community in relation to all that we've discussed. So take your time. You can basically rank the options, and it'd be interesting to see what comes out of it.
So this poll really came out of, we've got somebody beavering away in the background listening to the discussion and all the Menti comments coming in, and they've organised these different categories. So hopefully they make sense to you. I've got a really small screen here, so I can't actually read them off. Maybe Vanessa,
yeah, it's because there's so many options. So a page for COVID-19 initiatives on livestockdata.org, so somehow a place to collect all the different things that are going on. The next, obviously you can vote for these in whatever order you like, so I'm just reading them as they are here. Prioritization of livestock data needs, that's another possible action. Another action is data and tools, decision support, data and tools and resources. Another action is around open sharing of data, then coordination of surveys for impact of COVID-19 on livestock, further webinars and communications, and a systematic review of papers. And of course, if you have other things that you think should be in the top priorities, you can type them in the chat.
Thanks, Vanessa.
Okay.
So good to see people are voting there. The ranking has changed a little bit, I think. Not too much, but there seems to be a need for the prioritization of livestock data needs as a top priority. I guess a lot could be covered in that. And then the second priority is a decision support tool. So currently we've got 34 people that have voted. There are 66 on the line, so there's still plenty of opportunity to input your views. Unfortunately, we don't have free text, so you can't add your own comments, but if you type in other, we can collect those from you.
Yeah, you can type your other in the chat. We'll record the chat.
Yeah, also if you want to elaborate on any of your points in the chat box, for example, what does a prioritization of livestock data needs mean to you? Does it mean that we have to put more resources in, or there's a particular area that you want us to focus on, or the community to focus on? Because it's sort of quite a large catch-all.
Yeah. And Delia is suggesting what's missing is something around the One Health approach. So that's a good point, obviously.
Yeah, definitely.
So we'll give you a few more minutes to enter your thoughts and ideas, and maybe I can just mention what we're thinking about in terms of next steps. This meeting was really to generate ideas, to sort of take a scan of what's happening, get some initial suggestions on what the community is interested in doing or what the community feels is a priority. I think our next step might be to send around some kind of a post-meeting survey to try to get more detail on some of these ideas. And then we'll synthesize what has come through and put together a little report or a blog in terms of where we thought there was enough interest in consolidation, and we may eventually set up further discussions to follow up on some of these suggestions and proposals. In the meantime, we invite you to explore livestockdata.org. You can also interact with us on Twitter at LD4D Community. Feedback is always welcome and appreciated. And once again, thanks to our speakers for kicking off the discussion. We'll be posting a video, a recording of this webinar on livestockdata.org in the coming days, so you can revisit it or share with colleagues. Karen, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I'm trying to follow the chat box at the same time. I'm glad to say we've got Obai Kadalfi from BMGF here, and he raised a point with me. I don't know, Obai, if you would like to comment. He felt that one of the questions, that one of Ms. X's questions was not properly addressed. He asked whether the presenter meant investment in livestock or in data. So maybe we could ask for clarification on that.
Thank you so much. No, I just I wasn't sure if Ms. X's question was addressed properly. I think he just was clarifying whether investment in data or investment in livestock. And my understanding that investment in data is what is going to drive further investments in livestock. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, if we had the time, maybe we could have given the chance to the presenters just to respond to his question. Sorry about that.
Thanks, Abai. And sorry, I'm not keeping a very active eye on my chat box. We are over time, actually, I note. So perhaps we can follow that up at a later point.
Yeah, and I think this is not the last you're going to hear from us. We hope to have further discussions getting into some of the details and also on other topics not related to COVID-19 in the coming weeks and months. So we do greatly appreciate your time. We may allocate an hour and a half next time. We'll see if people have the appetite for that. But in any case, we look forward to sharing the outputs of this discussion with you and hope to see you again soon. So with that,
thank you everyone.
We'll end the meeting. Bye-bye.
Bye.